Hello, fellow travelers. I'm Nomad Jim, a retired minimalist solo full-time slow traveler. Thanks for stopping by. Today, I want to share with you 3 urgent reasons why I think that if you're someone who's considering doing some world travel in the future, that you'd be better off to do it sooner rather than later. And that's especially true if you're an American like me. So let's get started. The first reason why you should consider traveling sooner rather than later is that right now the US dollar is very strong. So if you're an American, that means that you have more purchasing power overseas. You go overseas, you're going to get more for your dollar than you used to in years past. Now, currencies are always fluctuating in value, so you never know how long this strength in the dollar is going to last. And given the instability and chaos that we're now starting to see in the US, and which is probably going to continue for the foreseeable future, that could have an impact on our economy and ultimately on the value of the US dollar, causing it to weaken. So it's in your best interest to travel now while the dollar is strong and you have more purchasing power outside the US. The second reason why you should consider traveling sooner rather than later is that the US passport currently is very strong. It enables us to travel to pretty much anywhere that we'd like to go. But that could change at any time. The reputation that America has around the world takes a hit each time that our government enacts a policy or takes actions that are unpopular with other countries around the world. Now, this is not a political channel, and I'm not taking sides. I'm just stating the fact that anytime our government does things, it has an effect on how we are perceived in the rest of the world. Now, I'm somebody who travels a lot outside of the US, and over the years, I've met with lots of people who are locals in the places I'm visiting, or who are traveling from other countries as well. And up until about 10 years ago, when I would meet with somebody and, one of the first things that you ask somebody is, where are you from? So when somebody would ask me that and I'd say I'm from the US, I would always get the same kind of a response. It would be first a smile, and then they would say something like, oh, I love the US. I was there a couple of years ago and I had a great time. Or they'll say something like, oh, I'd really love to visit there someday. It was always a positive kind of response. But in recent years, what I've noticed is that the response I get now is more often than not either a neutral one or a negative one. So sometimes people will say, I'm from the US, and they'll say, oh, okay. And then they quickly change the subject. They don't want to talk about it. Or they'll say something rather negative, like they'll say, oh, I'm not really interested to visit the US, or I'd never really want to go there. Just a very negative kind of response, something that I never used to get from people when I would talk with them in years past. So I can tell that the reputation that we have around the world has been changing. And like it or not, when our government does things that are unpopular, then people around the world not only have negative opinions about the US, but also about Americans. It may be unfair, but we're all painted with that same broad brush. We're all looked at the same way because of what our government does. So in the future, countries may decide, if they find the actions or the policies of the US government to be things that they don't agree with, they may decide to restrict access to Americans to their country, or maybe even deny access to their country. And it's not such a far-fetched thing to think about, because just a few years ago, this is a very common thing. Many countries were closing their borders to people from other countries. And the reason for that was because of the pandemic. Now, obviously, that was a health-related reason why they were doing that, but it just goes to show you that each individual country has the prerogative to close their borders, to deny entry, to make it difficult for people from certain countries to visit their country. And as a result, the US passport is going to become weaker and make it more difficult for us to go to places that we would like to visit. So that's why I say it's a good idea to travel now while the US passport is still strong, just in the event that things happen in the future, changes take place that affect our mobility around the world. A third reason to consider traveling sooner rather than later is that in the years to come, we're likely to see more instability around the world. We seem to be moving into this period of more aggression between countries, conflicts popping up. So we're in a period of time right now where things are relatively peaceful. It'd be a good time to travel now rather than a time later when things start to get a little messier, making some places undesirable to visit or impossible to visit. Now, I've always been really interested to visit the island of Socotra. And Socotra is part of the country of Yemen. So obviously right now, it's not a place that you can visit because Yemen is having a civil war. And there's no way to get to the island without going through the mainland of Yemen. So it's off limits. It's not something I'm going to be able to do. And it's an unfortunate thing, but I should have done this years ago when I first heard about the island, when things were more stable and safer there. But right now, it's off limits. It's not something that I'm going to be able to do. Hopefully someday, things will stabilize there, and I'll be able to go and visit there. But it just goes to show you that there are times when things will pop up, conflicts, whatever might be going on in different countries, that will make it undesirable to go to a place, make it unsafe to go there, or just make it totally impossible to go there. So that's why I say visit places that you're curious about and that you'd really like to go to while you still can during this period of relative peace, just in case things get a little more chaotic in the future. So I hope that this information serves as a wake-up call to you and makes you decide that you're not going to put off your world travels any longer. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please hit the like button, share it with others, leave a comment below, and if you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel. Until next time, let's get out there and travel.